All right, guys, the game just wrapped up over here to my right. Seahawks win 24-13. We just need out the clock with Holton. And yeah, that is your first Seahawks game of the season in the books. Seahawks look pretty good. There was nothing over the top crazy about this game, but it was an all-around pretty decent game. Seahawks outscored the Vikings 17-3 in the final two quarters to run away with it. And we did learn some stuff. We got some stuff to talk about here, so let's go ahead and run it down. And there's quite a bit to get through because we saw a lot of players out there today. A lot of players got time out there. So let's start with the offensive side of the ball. Let's just start with those guys. No Geno, which was expected at this point. No Walker, no McIntosh, no DK, no Lockett, no Cross, no Lucas. I don't think I saw Damian Lewis out there either. No Fant, no Disley. So definitely working with a lot of things that are not going to play a big role, if any role at all, when the regular season starts. But with that being said, there are still some things you want to look for. Of course, I think a lot of people on the offensive side were really excited to see the center position. They were excited to see JSN. They wanted to see how Locke had developed. They wanted to see the Charbonnet because he was one of the rookies who was out there for a decent chunk of the game. And we got a decent look at a lot of those things. I didn't feel like I saw any massive philosophical or schematic alterations from last season, which isn't the most surprising thing in the world when it is the first preseason game, but it didn't look too radically different from anything we saw last year on that front. So I'm not really going to have a lot to say about that because in terms of us running like some super wide open offense with a ton of receivers out there all the time, or us running a ton of man super exotic blitzy defenses, didn't really see a lot of that. But we did see some pretty good play and some pretty encouraging signs. So starting with the offense, let's open it up with Drew Lock. Other than that one really bad throw, and it was a bad throw. I know it was tipped, but it was still a bad throw. He looked really good. He looked really good out there. It was better than the preseason games he played last season, I think. And admittedly, looking really good for most of the game and then having the one or two really, really bad plays is kind of the Drew Lock experience to this point. So at the end of the day, you still look at that one mistake and you wonder how did that happen? But other than that, he played a very clean, solid, good game, made some plays, showcased his arm talent and his touch. And I came away from this game feeling pretty good about Drew. So that was cool. That's relevant. Some people are tossing around the idea of maybe Drew Lock becomes a trade piece at some point. Like maybe by week 5 or week 6, some team really wants a quarterback and they decide they want to go bet on Drew Lock. So if you think that's a possibility, then him looking good in the preseason is very important because if he doesn't look really good in the preseason, hard for me to believe anybody's going to trade for him. So on that front, that's encouraging. And of course, if the worst happens to Geno Smith, which is always possible, I think what you saw tonight for the most part is going to make you feel pretty good about a world where that happens. So Drew Lock looked good out there. The offense as a whole kind of was stuck in second gear for a pretty good chunk of the first half because of the offensive line. And namely, two guys on that offensive line were a problem, a bad kind of problem for the Seahawks. Stone Forsythe and Phil Haynes. Stone Forsythe, this is year 3 for him. Maybe it's just not going to happen. Maybe he's just not quick enough out of his stance. He's a little too big, a little too slow, doesn't move well. So maybe it's just not going to happen ever with Stone. Like this, I think, is a big season for him, and he couldn't handle even backup defensive edges. So Stone Forsythe, this may be kind of the end of the line here. If he can't even handle being a backup left tackle in this league, then I mean, it's not the most surprising thing in the world, but there was definitely some expectation of him when we drafted him, and it just doesn't look like it's ever going to happen. So that's Stone. Now, Stone's whatever. He is a backup, and he might not even be the first backup left tackle off the bench For all I know, we put Curhan out there instead, or Island. I don't know. I don't know if Stone Forsythe would, in a actual real game, be the first left tackle off the bench. So that's one thing. But Phil Haynes is starting this year, and he did not look a whole lot better. So I understand that he is playing out of position because he was at left guard today, but he's supposed to be a left guard in the first place. So I'm not really encouraged by that. I know he's going to be right guard for us this year, but the fact that he doesn't even look good at his more natural position to me is an indication that it just might not work out either way. And like I said, Phil Haynes is going to start this year. And from what we saw from Anthony Bradford tonight, he's not ready. Like, he does show tremendous potential, but he's not ready to play yet. So it may be a situation where we just have to hope the rest of the offensive line is good enough to mask the deficiencies of having Phil Haynes at right guard. So I think that was the main thing that stymied our offense for a decent chunk of this game. Just the play of the offensive line was not good. We couldn't really get a running game going until late in the game when both teams had their third and fourth string out there. There were some passing plays that kind of got blown up prematurely by pressure. And if you remove that element, I was mostly happy with what I saw. I know Charbonnet didn't put up big numbers or anything, but I like the way he runs. I like the way he looks. He looks like he's going to be an important part of this offense going into the regular season. And I thought he looked good despite not putting up any crazy big numbers. And he was our only primary running back out there today because Walker wasn't. And McIntosh, if you believe that McIntosh is going to be a primary part of this offense this season, he's not out there either. So we don't have our full slate of running backs out there, so it's not surprising that we struggled to run the ball a little bit. Receivers, we actually had a lot of receivers flash today. There was some really bad news. Eskridge gets hurt on the opening kickoff. I don't know how serious it is yet. And then at halftime, Cade Johnson had to get carted off. He had to get stretchered off for some kind of concern about his head or neck. I don't know exactly what it is. I haven't heard confirmation yet on Cade Johnson, but he did go to a local hospital. So that's not good. We don't like that at all. The same thing happened 2 years ago to Darrell Taylor, and he played like 2 weeks later. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a serious injury, but there was some real concern that it was a big thing at one point. So we're going to wait for more information, maybe get it sometime tomorrow, and hopefully it's not. Because you guys know I love Cade Johnson. So there was some bad news on the receiver front, but we got to see a little bit of JSN, and JSN made some plays out there. Loved it. Looking good out there. You can see how this is going to work when the regular season starts. And while, again, I'm not saying we did crazy stuff with receivers in this game, putting like 4 and 5 out there at a time and, running 3 receiver sets every single play or anything like that. But you see that JSN looks so good, it's just going to be so hard to keep him off the field when the season starts. So because of that, I think that what we see from JSN is going to encourage this team to make sure those guys get out there. But not just JSN. We saw some really good plays from Aesop Winston Jr., who's very much a forgotten man in this receiver core. But he was one of our best receivers tonight. He caught a touchdown. He caught other difficult passes. Caught a pass to set up a short field goal. And Aesop Winston, I don't know if there's room for him on this team, but he looked like a guy that Drew Lock was very comfortable throwing to in this game. Jake Bobo. Jake Bobo may have been our best receiver today. He was awesome out there. You can see that the speed is not making it so that he can't contribute out there. Like, he's running, some people say he runs like a 5-second 40. More realistically, it's probably like 4.6, 4.7. It's slow, but he finds other ways to get open despite it. Like, he toasted Andrew Booth, a very talented player, for a touchdown in this game on an obvious passing down. Absolute thing of beauty. So he can get open. He is not going to be out there completely unable to do anything just because he's slow. Like, he can find ways to get open even with that very slow speed. You had Landers, and look, Landers very raw. You can see that, but it was nice to see him get involved. He had the one play where he almost caught the touchdown, and the defender made an amazing play. And then he caught one of the dumbest touchdowns ever, granted, but he caught it. And that's kind of his problem right now. He can't catch. So if he can start catching the ball, we got a little something here. Screen passes. We ran some screen passes in this game that actually worked pretty well. There was the dump offs to Charbonnet. There was a screen to Charbonnet. There was a screen to, kind of a screen to Colby Parkinson for his one catch. There were screens to Kobach. There was the beautiful wheel route to Kobach where you see Drew Lock's touch. So it's not just he has a cannon for an arm. He can also layer the ball a little bit, have layers to his throws. So screen passes have been a thing the Seahawks have not done very well in the last several years. Tonight we actually saw some indications that maybe it's starting to head the right way there. Maybe we are starting to develop some kind of a screen game in Seattle. So that, I think, was maybe the most encouraging thing I saw in this game. But most of the players I thought played quite well. To me, the first half offense was just really stymied because we just couldn't get past the fact that Forsyth and Phil Haynes were getting beat up. And that was in the run and the pass, to my eye. So that was most of what I saw on the offensive side. Mostly encouraged by what I saw out there. Only had the one bad turnover, and it was a bad turnover, but just the one turnover. Had the one sack, which was a strip sack right before the end of the half. A screen pass, actually, so you can see we're not perfect in that area. But overall, I think the offense looked good. Once the offensive line was able to stabilize against the Vikings' third and fourth string, I thought the offense actually looked quite good out there. I'm not really going to speak too much about a guy. I'll even shout out Holton Allers, because Holton actually looked pretty good in this game. I do want to be clear here. He's clearly not an NFL player, and this will never work on an NFL level, but he's fun to have around. There's something to be said for that. There's something fun about having a Tim Tebow clone. So if he wants to stick around on the practice squad, I mean, I don't have a personal issue with it. I don't know if anybody you get on the practice squad at quarterback is going to be that much better. I do know there are guys out there who are a little bit better, a little more NFL caliber, but having Holton around is kind of fun. And I know people are going to be anticipating seeing him again at some point in this preseason, because I'm sure you will see him at least one more time. So that's basically my rundown of the offense. The defense started out there. We got run over a little bit early in the game, and if you look at our starting defensive line, it makes a lot of sense why. We were starting one guy on the defensive line in Morris, who is going to make the team. We were starting another guy, Miles Adams, who could go one way or the other. And then we're starting a defensive tackle that we just picked up a few days ago, Perry. So I think that's kind of expected that you get plowed over a little bit. So our defensive line was getting beat up a little bit, but there were splash plays. And I want to talk about what I mean by that. Overall, you saw a decent number of ugly run defense reps from this defense, where Ty Chandler's picking up 8 yards, 9 yards, a little bit of missed tackling, a little bit of just stuff like that. But what we also brought to the table in this game were the splash plays against the run, where you penetrate into the backfield and you're bringing somebody down for a loss or no gain. Boye Mafe actually looked pretty dominant in this game against the run, and as a pass rusher too. Now, he should look dominant in a game like this where he's playing a decent number of backups, but he looked great out there, made some plays back there. Devin Bush, I think Devin Bush was a bit of a revelation tonight. A lot of people are saying he can't be counted on, but he looked great tonight. I think that Mike Morris looked good on the defensive line as well, for what he is, understanding that he is, at the end of the day, a rookie and you're not going to expect the world out of him. He looked good. So at the end of the day, our run defense actually averaged out to be pretty effective and pretty good in this game. Held the Vikings to less than 85 yards rushing, 3.2 yards per carry. I understand that that doesn't take away how much we gave up early on, but it did kind of even out because when you're giving up the occasional, as long as your big plays aren't like 50-yard gains, the big runs we were giving up tonight were like 8 or 9 yards. Those were the big runs. And it's pretty easy to wipe those out when you're making plays at the line of scrimmage and in the backfield. So those were two guys that kind of stood out to me, Mafe and Smith. I'm sorry, Mafe and Morris. I'd also say Tyreek Smith, a guy who I'm not expecting very much from at all, actually looked good today. For the most part, he got blown up on one play, but other than that, I thought he looked pretty good. It was definitely a game that is going to make some people wonder about our defensive line a little bit, but it's really important that everyone keeps in mind here. We didn't have anybody who was likely to start on the week one defensive line. Our starting week one defensive line is probably Draymond Jones and Mario Edwards or free agent signing X and Jaron Reed at nose. None of those guys were out there tonight. So when those guys get out there, you are going to see something different. Now, of course, you're going to see something different from other teams as well. But I definitely think some people were a little too alarmed by some of the stuff we saw from the run defense. The main thing from the defense that, I don't know if concern is the right word. The main thing I saw that kind of, I guess you could say, disappointed me a little bit, it was relatively vanilla. Not entirely. We saw a couple of defensive back blitzes. We did see some stuff that seems to be more indicative of us trying to build a team around the players that we have. But most of it looked pretty soft. Decent amount of zone coverage. Nothing crazy over the top in those areas of like, oh, we're doing something new this year. We're going to do something different this time to, do something different this year to try to customize our team around the players that we're going to have. Granted, a lot of those players aren't out there, but some of them are. And that I could have done with a little more of. I would have liked to have seen more man defense. I would have liked to have seen more blitzing. But we got 2 more preseason games left to uncover that. And again, it's not like the players were playing poorly. I do think we got pretty good pressure throughout the game on Mullen and Hall. The sacks didn't start, and the QB hits didn't really start until the second half. But even in that first half, guys like Mafe and Smith and Morris were getting into the backfield and making that quarterback very uncomfortable. So we generated consistent pressure throughout the game, and that pressure was disrupting things. So meaningful, important pressure. That's where it all starts, and the sacks will come eventually. Trey Brown, I thought, looked really good, and he even had a big kickoff return, by the way. So special teams value. And then he gave up the 20-yarder in the red zone, and then he got beat on a touchdown because he's just too short. I'm not really going to hold that one against him, but he did get beat 2 straight plays, or 2 out of 3 plays. So mixed bag for Trey Brown, but I did like some of the stuff I saw early in this game from him. Kobe Bryant was actually, I thought Kobe Bryant played great, and he needed that because Kobe's been getting beat up in camp. He did not get beat up today. He laid some hits, laid some serious wood. I like what I see from Kobe Bryant tonight. It tells me that this whole move to safety thing really might work. This move to safety thing really may end up being the best thing for him. Because you can see he's a little bit slow in direct man coverage. But you put him at safety, that's not as big of a deal. That's not as big of a concern. He can focus on lane hits and trying to force the ball out. 2 things that it looks like he can really do. Focus on being a ball hawk, trying to take the ball away. And wouldn't shock me at all if that's how this ended up working out. So I liked what I saw from him. And that was the main stuff in terms of... Jackson. Yeah, Mike Jackson looked good. But I think we've kind of come to expect that now because we hear so many amazing things about him in training camp. So that's most of what I can say about the defense. As the game went on, it obviously got better and better. But there are going to be some people a little bit concerned about what we showed in that first half, especially with some of the run defense, some of the third down stuff. We saw some receivers get wide open. just understand it's the first preseason game. These guys aren't really tackling very much in practice at all. So they're going to miss tackles when they get out there for the first preseason game. It's going to get ramped up as time goes by here. So overall, I think the defense was pretty encouraging in this game. I got no real beef with the way they played overall in terms of result. And special teams was great. We dominated the special teams battle. We made a field goal and 3 extra points. We had a muffed punt recovery on special teams. Had that play where we came like a half an inch away from pinning the Vikings at the 1 yard line. Special teams was good. We had at least one big kick return. Our coverage was good. And the only thing we did on special teams I think that wasn't good was Dixon had one bad punt. And I'm not worried about Dixon because he's been really, really good at this for a few years now. And yeah, that's about it. That's a rundown. That's already way too long to spend on a game, but there was a lot to get through. So I'm going to go live on stream in a little bit here, and we'll go for a little bit. Hope to see you guys there. Go Hawks.